So this series is entitled Understanding the Aleinu Prayer. I chose this because I think the Aleinu prayers always had bad press. And even though we say it at the end of every weekday and Shabbat and Chag service, Shacharit, Mincha, and Ma'ariv, and it forms a central part of our davening on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'm not sure if we really get this prayer and if we've had enough time to learn about its significance, its background, its meaning. The problem is, I think that in most of our experience of Aleinu, it's rattled off too fast to mean much to most people, especially as it's quite a long and linguistically a bit of a tongue twister. At least if we're davening on our own, we can say it a bit more at a reasonable pace. But even then, how many of us have tried to get to grips with what we are actually saying? Is it a tefillah that we necessarily pick from the bag? From some of the discussions I've had with people over the years, it emerges that anyone who's taken a bit of time to investigate the meaning of Aleinu has found its concepts quite abstruse and sometimes at face value, even offensive. So the Chida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who lived in the 1724 to 1807, so sort of 18th to 19th century, writes that Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai established the practice of saying Aleinu after each of the 3 daily prayers, so that our practice of doing that goes right back to the time of the second Beit HaMikdash. So Yochanan ben Zakkai lived at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. And he was the one who prepared the Jewish people for the coming period of exile by establishing several new practices. Because he knew that once they were scattered amongst the nations, Jews would begin to assimilate and perhaps lose their distinctiveness or their uniqueness. And we'll discuss all these big concepts. And he wanted to strengthen their identity and remind them of their unique relationship with God through the frequent daily saying of Aleinu, which thinking I hope we'll better understand by the end of today's session. So let's see in this series if we can come closer to understanding the Aleinu prayer so it becomes more meaningful by drawing on an unusual and very famous commentary by the 14th century Rishon, Rabbi David ben Yosef Abu Yudraham. Now, the Abdurraham, who lived in Seville in Spain, was one of the Rishonim. The Rishonim, which translated literally means the first ones, refers to the leading rabbis and poskim who lived approximately during the 11th to the 15th centuries in the era before the writing of the Shulchan Aruch by Rabbi Yosef Karo. And I've given you a little, it might be useful, a little. And this is a timeline showing you when the Rishonim lived. Now the Abdurraham's work, originally entitled Chibur Perush Habrachot Vehatfilot. So at the time the Abdurraham was writing, Jewish religious life and Talmud scholarship in Spain was still on a very high level, thanks to his own influence. The Abdurraham's work was originally entitled Chibur Perush Habrachot Vehatfilot, and it was printed for the first time in Lisbon in 1489. So are we clear that we are the source, the main source for our analysis of the Aleinu is coming from the Sefer Avud Raham. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Yes. And that this is a 15th century, printed in 1489 work, which is very significant because the Avud Raham systematically collected and explained all the customs and the laws and the meanings relating to the entire daily and Shabbat and festival prayers. And this was a first. There hadn't been a sefer like this, either in the Sephardi or Ashkenazi world. And it's hugely significant. He included commentaries from the Talmud Bavli and Yerushalmi, and from the Geonim, and from the poskim of previous generations. So he was across the board, right up to his own time. And as well as from other seminal sources, this is the main source that we will be studying from. But before studying this text of Aleinu, let's look at the Tanakh for some of the secret history behind this prayer. And this is actually very, very fascinating. So here I'm going to be, again, sharing screen, and please tell me if the sound is clear here. So here's the screen. So here we have the Chumash source. After the sin of the golden calf, Moshe requested of God in Shemot chapter 33, verse 16. Uvameh yivada efo ki matzati chen be'enecha. How shall it be known that your people have gained your favor? God, Moshe asks God. Ani va'amecha halo velechtecha imanu. Unless you go with us, me and your people, unless you go with us. Now, v'nifleinu ani va'amacha mikol ha'am, so that we may be distinguished. V'nifleinu, key word, your people and I. Mikol ha'am, asher al pnei ha'adama. Your people and I may be distinguished mikol ha'am, from every people on the face of the earth. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, and God said to Moshe, Gam et hadavar hazeh asher dibarta eseh. I will also do this thing that you have asked. Ki matzata chen be'enai va'adacha b'shem. For you have truly gained my favor, and I have singled you out by name. Now here we've got these two very, very significant aspects of nifleinu, and also to single you out. I've given you a name and I have singled you out. So now let's have a look at this. Again, we're going to, get back to the text. All right. So what's exactly going on in this piece of Chumash, and how does it relate to our understanding of Aleinu? Before the Chet Ha'egel HaZahav, before the sin of the golden calf, Moshe didn't have a reason to ask God, because the Bnei Israel hadn't sinned. And they'd now put themselves on the level of every other idol-worshipping nation. Once they'd sinned with the golden calf, the Bnei Israel had lost some of their uniqueness as God's people. And Moshe was troubled by the possibility that other nations now might arise above Bnei Israel to serve God because Bnei Israel had forfeited their special relationship. Before, they were free of sin, and now they participated in having sin. So they were a nation who had sinned, and they were on an equal footing with other nations. They had become, essentially, an idol-worshipping nation. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't concerned about Bnei Israel's honor, but he was very concerned about their innate, essential connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is why he uses the word v'niflinu in the text, v'niflenu. You have distinguished us. He knew that v'niflinu, being distinctive, was an essential tool in avodat Hashem, in serving God. Because the more a person feels their particular, not exclusive, I want to be very clear here, identity, that he or she belongs to a specific, particular group of people with unique values and beliefs, the stronger their expression of divine service is likely to be, and their actions and connection to God. No one person can shoulder the responsibility of Torah and Avodah alone, not even Moshe. And we see this often through his life. Moshe was asking God to rest his presence once again, his Shekhinah. Interesting, the Shekhinah is the feminine aspect of God, the one which is compassionate and yet very possessive and quite cruel sometimes. The Shekhinah was present at Kriyat Yam Suf, the fierce protective elements. So Moshe was invoking here the Shekhinah, the feminine aspect of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, fiercely protective, to be present amongst the Jewish people again. The chesed bigvura, the kindness which is coming from severity, because we'd realized our error. And we had done teshuvah now, after the Chet HaEgel HaZahar. And we needed once again to know and to commit to the fact that we were not an idol-worshipping nation, but we were distinct from these. In the current political climate, we can discuss uniqueness, distinctive particularity, but let's wait until the end of this explanation, background context. So this distinctiveness was something we requested to have back, part of our identity. However, there was a little twist, a little sting in the tail. And it was now our responsibility, our obligation, Aleinu. It is on us, once we reclaim our covenantal relationship with God, to maintain it. And that is the basis on which God agrees, as we've seen in the Chumash above, to bestow it. If you want this distinctiveness, yes, I will come along. You have found favor in my eyes, again, for requesting this distinctiveness and committing to it. After all, a covenantal relationship is reciprocal. It's not one way. It's between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people, and it's a two-way flow. Yeah? No free lunches here. So now perhaps we can understand a little bit better why we say Aleinu in the middle of the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, in our Yamim Noraim davening. Because the prayers of these days are built on the prayers of Moshe Rabbeinu. These are the days of Teshuvah. Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing to the attention of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the Bnei Israel have done teshuvah. Vayechal Moshe, just as Moshe Rabbeinu asked God for mercy for the Jewish people after the sin of the golden calf, and also that this forgiveness would protect them down the future generations in the future. But not because we said it once, but because we reiterate it. Perhaps we reiterate it 3 times a day. And especially on the Yamim and Ara'im, as we'll see. And as a sacred response to this request for Rachamim, God utters the Yud Gimel Midot HaRachamim in response, the 13 attributes of mercy. We recite them each day in Shacharit to remind ourselves, and God as it were, of this sacred relationship over the generations. And most memorably, we recite them several times and poignantly and heartbreakingly. And especially this year when, I don't know what kind of shul experience, kehillah, community we will be able to have together. And we're looking at that energetically in the community right now. The rabbinic team, the executive are really on the board, are working away at opening our shul once again. So when will we share this moment, this poignant moment, when we and HaKadosh Baruch Hu say these words? And here they are. And I'll now share my screen again. And you will see them. Oh, where are they? And they will be so familiar. V'ya'avor Hashem al panav v'yikra. Hashem, Hashem, el rachum v'chanon. Erech habayim v'rach chesed v'emet. Natzeh chesed la'alafim. Naisei avon v'ofesha v'chata v'nakeh. And then God passed in front of Moshe and he said, the Lord, sorry, I can just hear the community in my mind. And God is compassionate and gracious and slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1000th generation and forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Now, there's again a sting in the tail, because it has to do with the brakes we need to put on against an automatic feeling that, oh yeah, anything we do, it'll, we've got this guarantee for life. And yet God does not remit all punishments, but there is accountability from one generation to another, and another, and another. And after this proclamation, Vayimaher Moshe v'yikad arza vayishtachu. And Moses hastened to bow low, v'yishtachu, to bow low to the ground in homage, as we do When we say Aleinu, Vayomer imna matzati chen beinecha Adonai, Yelechna Adonai, Birkirbeinu, Ki am kashe orefu.
I think down here the icon.
Yes. So here, can you not hear?
No, it's just that I have somebody here who is a workman. And,
Okay.
just ignore me.
Okay. So if you could just put on your mute. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us back for your own. So that our bakasha to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we prostrate ourselves on the ground, is a bakasha to accept us again for his own. Okay, very emotional. That's what we're doing. Whether it's in our lounge this year or whether we are in the synagogue, that is what we are doing. Extraordinary. So I'd like to offer an added perspective as to why we prostrate ourselves entirely before God on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The words, of course, in the Aleinu is Va'anachnu korim, bend down knees, Umishtachavim, bow down, Umodim, and give praise to Melech Malchei Hamlachim. Finish it, please. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what we say in the Aleinu, and when we look at the text, we will study it in detail. But now you have it in a different context. And we are mimicking, reflecting, calling on that primordial image of Moshe. Va'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. To God, the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. What an acknowledgement of all those levels. And we dedicate, or shall I say, rededicate ourselves completely. And here is the new perspective with all 5 levels of our soul. From the very lowest and physical, earthly, to the very highest, the one which is bound up with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And these levels, which I'm going to set out for you now, are expounded on at length in the Zohar and other mystical sources. And they are these, all part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We bow with our nefesh. The nefesh is the fundamental, lowest is a kind of comparative. It's our basic, fundamental, earthliest, physical, animalistic, and material soul. The one which needs meat to eat, which needs a hot breakfast from God each day, gratis. Or which needs a golden calf. And with that, we bow. The next level of soul is ruach. After nefesh comes ruach. And this is our sentient soul. The soul which looks up from the ground, unlike an animal on 4 legs whose head and eyes are mostly directed downward, or at least to the side or front, sometimes behind, but not very much upwards, unless like sometimes a wolf bays at the moon, but that's not where he's going to get his food from. So we look up from that and around from that limited perspective in the ruach aspect of our neshama, and we are able to survey and admit, allow for the possibility of a bigger world, Melech Malchei HaMelachim, and other existences beyond our own, even bein Adam lechavero, our fellow human beings. A greater but yet unfocused, vague awareness of otherness. And with that, ruach, part of our soul, we bow down. And then neshama, our godly soul, where the physical and the spiritual meet in an embrace, which mystical philosophies call a chelek Elokai nimal mamash, a piece of God in materiality, in our soul. And we look there to the creation story in which God breathes life into the soul of humankind. And when we breathe from ourselves. And so we have a piece of godliness in us, b'mamashut, in our actual material soul, and b'mamashut, in materiality, in the world with which we interact and engage. And with the neshama, part of our soul, we bow down. So we've had nefesh, ruach, neshama, and the fourth aspect, dimension of our soul is chai, life, vivification, the soul which lifts off, if you want, completely directed toward God and desirous of godliness. Almost separating from, no, I don't want to say separating from, de-emphasizing, leaving the material in order to access the spiritual. Chai, and with this part of our soul, we, mishtachavim, bow down. And the final fifth aspect of our soul, yechidah, yachid, oneness, the soul with which we become one with God, where it says, as in Pirkei Avot, where my will as a human being becomes your will with a capital Y. Until now, my will, my ratzon, what I want becomes ratzonacha, your will. And the most difficult of all here, they are indistinguishable. And you know, we don't have to die to get this. We're not saying people who've passed away will arrive at such a point. No. These are parts of us, the 5 parts of us daily, every moment. Elokai neshama shenatatahi torahi. Every morning in the brachot before Shacharit, we say, God, the soul which you have given me, restore to me. Torahi is pure, ready to go right from the very beginning. There's no concept of original sin. There's no besmirching. Every day is new. Take it with both hands. And it is these 5 dimensions, our entire self, that we bend to and prostrate into our service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we acknowledge him as Melech Malchei HaMelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is Baruch Hu? That God is blessed? No. I mean, I suppose God is blessed. Fact is that God is the source of our blessings. Yes. So whenever we make a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, it's not that God is blessed, although I'm sure he is. She is, God is, godliness is. But we are blessed. by the source of God's blessings in whichever mitzvah, etc., we are going to enact. So this moment of umishtachavim, where we bow down to the ground on the Yamim Noraim, and 3 times a day, Rachel Emunah, our beloved Rachel Emunah, my granddaughter, she knows what this is about. She bows down whenever she says Aleinu, because she knows what she's doing. And whenever we say Aleinu, that is what we have to do in our minds, in our hearts, in our machshava, dibur, and ma'aseh. When we bow down, of course, we're not, if it's not the Yamim Noraim, we're not going to bow down to the ground. We don't have our courage. But that is essentially what we're doing. It is a supreme meditative moment in which we acknowledge our obligation to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is master of everything. And this is what we say in the very opening words of Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol. And recognize that God didn't make us like the nations of other lands, as we've discussed, because we've asked for niflinu. He didn't position us like the families of the ground, because we've asked. We've said we are not going to remain on the level of a nefesh. And we must ensure the active reciprocity of our covenantal relationship with God. It isn't one way, a covenantal relationship. It's you and me. It is the both of us, where both are mutually nourished by one another. So very big ideas of Aleinu, and I wanted today, haven't finished yet, not quite, and then it's over to you. I wanted to put this in context for you to see how crucial this prayer is. Why it's stuck at the end, we can debate. So one more final source of the origins of Aleinu, and as I say, then we can discuss or move on, whatever you choose. So Rav Sadia Gaon, the Gaonim, he lived in 882 to 942, and he was one of the last and most famous of the Gaonim. He was, that's the common era. He was a great Talmudic scholar and Jewish philosopher, an inspiring leader. And Rav Sadia Gaon writes that Joshua, composed Aleinu. This is after Moshe, and what we looked at in Shemot. This is in Yehoshua, in Nevi'im. And again, recorded obviously in the Chumash, in Tanakh entirely. So Yehoshua composed Aleinu when the Jewish people entered Eretz Yisrael. And if you remember the rationale that in the second temple, when the Jews were being spread out to all the nations, and when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai composed the form of Aleinu, here Yehoshua did it again. not because they were being spread out, but because they were going to become a nation amongst nations. And he did it because he clearly saw that even after the miraculous victory of Jericho, where God's might clearly won the battle for them, there were still some Jews who just couldn't keep their side of the bargain. And here is the famous story of Achan, because Yeshua had commanded on oath that no one was to keep any single item of booty from the city of Jericho for themselves. However, Achan of the tribe of Yehudah yielded to temptation. Even after this miraculous victory, I must say, you know, I'm learning now and in Shmuel, and I cannot believe how the Bnei Israel again and again just lost their bearings. And Achan of the tribe of Yehudah yielded to temptation, and he appropriated clothing and gold and silver for himself, despite the oath that no one would take booty. And he buried it in the ground under his tent. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu got furious, and he caused at Ai some serious setbacks to the Jewish army, until Yehoshua discovered by questioning each and every tribe one by one, until Achan confessed and gave up the booty and paid for it with his life. There's no zero tolerance in those days. Tricky. Yeshua felt the need to compose the Aleinu prayer and for the people to say it, acknowledging their relationship with God. Please put your mute on. Acknowledging their relationship with God at the very moment they entered Eretz Israel. This was because, as we've seen, there was still individual weakness amongst them, as the Achan example had shown. And Yeshua understood that Israel, once it became a nation competing with other nations, and I draw the distinction again between Yochanan ben Zakkai, who saw that one nation would be scattered, and that was a test, a trial, going to be an obstacle. And here, Yeshua saw that becoming a nation again, competing with other nations, would become an obstacle to remembering the covenantal relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? Because it's a nation competing with other nations, and we see this with Israel today in many ways, not in every way. She would develop a different set of priorities, and there was a real risk that people would begin to lose sight of their relationship with God, and they needed to be reminded of it constantly as they became part of a politically, economically, and socially widening and changing world. And so now, against this backdrop, which I hope has been helpful or interesting, and once we've discussed any questions you have, we'll study the text of the Aleinu prayer as we know it. So let me ask you for your comments.
Lynndy?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Are you talking to me, or I think there's somebody else as well asking a question?
Francis.
You go ahead. You go ahead, Francis.
Okay.
And then Alexandra.
If I say the Aleinu prayer, but I say it in English. What's your feeling about that?
You know what? God understands all languages. But I think that you must make an effort to build up the Hebrew.
Yeah. I always start with the Hebrew.
Yes.
The truth is that I'm always reticent about being behind, as in I can't keep up with everybody. So, you know, I'll start off in the English, but because, in the Hebrew, but because it's a fairly long prayer, you know, it goes over the page.
It is.
I sort of end up trying to keep up, and in order that I don't lose the next part of the service. So I say it in English.
Yeah, that's a pretty good sort of mid position. But there are two things I have to say. I think that really meaning and understanding of the prayer with kavanah, with your heart, putting yourself in the zone that we've been talking about, and building up slowly the Hebrew language. Demand of yourself, you know, if it's one sentence, now on to two, and perfecting that and understanding that. Keeping up is less important. I never keep up in shul. I can't daven at that speed. I can't daven with any meaning at that speed very often. I have to say, and that's lots of people. So I think whilst, you know, there seems to be the feeling that we need to keep up, I think prayer is called avodat lev, the work of the heart. And we need to work on our hearts and minds and understanding and praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Work up the Hebrew. Build up those Hebrew sentences. Get your tongue and teeth around them. They're quite difficult, Hebrew, actually. Hebrew is much simpler. This is a real tongue twister. And at the same time, then move to the English. That's fine. But in the days, one of the gifts of COVID, which is such a counterintuitive phrase, but there are some, it's that we can pray alone, or we can pray together with our Kabbalah Shabbat or our morning prayer group. But we're beginning to pray with more meaning. Being at home, yeah, we have permission to go more slowly or more meaningfully. So keeping up, I think, is something which is a self-conscious need, and I totally understand it. But prayer is between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avodat lev. Build up the Hebrew. Give yourself a challenge. And what you don't say in Hebrew, you say in English, but keep on building up the Hebrew. Alexandra, you're going to say something.
Thank you for contextualizing all the biblical aspect. It's really interesting. My question is about, Aleinu's had a really interesting history and journey. It's one of those prayers where it's gone through lots of translations and versions. And my question is more about, I've never understood the opening and closing of the ark, how that varies from Shabbat to Rosh Hashanah. And sometimes we have it, it's different. And I've never quite understood how that has evolved.
When we say Aleinu.
Yes, yes, correct. There is a difference.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, again, it's such an interesting question, because doesn't it reflect what we've said? You know, in the middle of the Shemona Esrei, at the high point of the Yamim Noraim davening, we bow down to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and every gate is open. The Aron HaKadosh, everything is open there. It is the high point, the high point. And then the daily one is a note. Remember this? Aide de mémoire. Could you please picture this in your mind? Could you please summon this? But truly, at the end of the service, the Aron HaKadosh is closed. And just as we leave shul, yeah, it takes 1 minute to say, it's not the time then to, it doesn't flow with, okay, let's have a quick, folks, hang on, don't put the talitot away, don't put the siddurim away, hang on. It has to be an internal thing. Before we leave, let's bring this to mind. Aleinu, it's on us. Does that to a certain extent address the question?
But it just shows it shows that it's more important. Well, it's elevated on the Chag to a different position, and it's made more of. That's my take on it.
Yes, I think also what we are saying in the Shemona Esrei is that it's one of the essential pillars, strands of our relationship. Don't forget this. Let me remind you. Comes always at the end. Bring it to the center now, because this is what this is about. And then it's attached to this heartbreaker. Hashem, Hashem, El Rachum V'Chanun. It's happening. It's a community meditation. It's extraordinarily powerful. Anyone else? What do you think about bowing? It's a funny one. We don't bow. We don't. As the Queen said when the Jewish man was about to be knighted by her and he didn't kneel, she turned to the Duke of Edinburgh and said, "Why is this knight different?" We don't bow, we don't kneel. But here we prostrate. I wonder what people think about that. I'm going to leave it with you. I'm going to leave it with you to reflect on. I want perhaps you to bring to mind how you feel. Does that feel a very holy moment? How does that feel to prostrate oneself? Are you going to do it at home? If you are at home on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are you going to do that at home in a meditative gesture where meditation doesn't only reside in the mind, but it flows through to the limbs and the body? And God is present in your study, lounge, dining room, wherever you're praying, bedroom, kitchen. I'm always interested, I've always asked myself why Modim comes after Umishtachavim. I always think Umishtachavim is so powerful. How could you say anything after that? But then, as Ellie usually does, Umodim. Okay, folks, snap out of it. Thank God as well. Don't only kind of keel over in some kind of spiritual trance. Yeah. Thoughts. Nobody's not that I want to make a big thing of it, yeah. But I do want to ask if anybody has any feelings in the current political climate of distinctiveness, uniqueness? Or has it been explained to a certain extent by putting Aleinu in context? Thanks, Joy. Thanks very much. I am aware that. Sorry, yeah, please.
Can you rephrase the question?
Can I rephrase the question? In the political context of Black Lives Matter, do you feel awkward about the ideas of distinctiveness, uniqueness, particularity in Aleinu? Because that is essentially why Aleinu has bad press, one of the reasons. I was keen to put the prayer in context because I wanted to share its narrative. And when we study the text, we'll visit this again. But I wondered if anything strikes you now.
Doesn't it have a history of censorship or something? Isn't there something about, there's some weird stuff from before, from the Middle Ages, about spitting or something, or I don't know. It's got, there's something been taken out, hasn't there?
When we utter the sentence, and this is one of the things, and I'll deal with it when in the text with the actual words when we come to it. When we come to the words that where we say to God, thank you for not making us like the people of the ground who bow down to heaven, the reik, vanity and emptiness. Va'anachnu korim. Some people do spit at that point. To not use the same energy as those who bow down to idols, to emptiness and to vanity, not use that energy, the saliva, in the same sentence to say va'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim, and we bow down to God. But I don't want to mention God and idols in the same breath. This is a minhag. Some people find it entirely objectionable. And I think this is one of the things which have unfortunately given Aleinu bad PR, and the people who do it prejudicial image. I'm not going to explain it away. I've explained it. Uncomfortable. I want to leave this as follows. I want to think about uniqueness and identity. Uniqueness and unique and common identities. Every color, creed, race, person has a unique and common identity. It doesn't mean they have to jive. Every race, creed, ethnic group, etc., person has their own narrative, and no one has the right to trample on that or extinguish it. However, I suppose that we have to invoke here the harm principle. And to think very, very carefully about what that means in our engagement with others. What is harmful to them? What is harmful to us? Where are the common identities and where are the unique? Where is the dialogue across difference? Which doesn't mean that we always have to agree, but does mean that our understanding is hugely broadened and enhanced. Not that everything goes. The Shekhinah is strict and loving. I'd like, if there are any more questions or discussions, I'm really happy to continue. I suppose what I want to do with just to end that soliloquy is not to appropriate the name of another group or political group, but to say these words with meaning of what they mean in the English language. I'm not going to therefore say all lives matter. I'm going to say every life matters.